Good afternoon and welcome to the Hibs Observer Friday briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin. As we took a look at Hibs' second signing of the summer, Raphael Sallinger, goalkeeper arriving from TSV Hartberg in the Australian Bundesliga. To bolster David Gray's options between the sticks. It was always going to be a priority position for the club this summer, with Joseph Bursick's loan ending and Max Boric being released at the end of his contract, really leaving from last season. Only Jordan Smith in that position, with young Murray Johnson coming back from a couple of loans at Airdrie and then Queen of the South. So it was always going to be a priority for Hibs to get somebody in that position, and they've moved pretty swiftly and efficiently to get that done. So we're going to take a closer look at the new man and see what he can bring to the team moving forward, having signed a 3-year contract. Just before we get started, as always, a quick word from our sponsor. The Hibs Observer is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. So, Patrick, Raphael Sallinger, 3-year contract. Hibs have got a new goalkeeper. What's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've known for some time that it's going to be. We knew it was a key position to be filled. I think we knew for some time it was probably likely to be between himself and Alex Pollson, the Bournemouth keeper who had been on loan at Auckland FC in the A-League, another Black Knight club. And I think there's probably a lot for Hibs to think about in terms of bringing in a number one. So many different things to consider. I think from the from the point of view of having somebody who can really kind of provide competition for Jordan Smith, somebody who has experience of playing in. When I say European football, I don't necessarily mean like the Europa League, Conference League, whatever, but just having played, in Europe, that's something that Alex Pollson doesn't have. He spent the whole of his career playing for teams in New Zealand, and obviously playing in the A-League the past couple of years. So I think it was, key to get someone in who was, the right character. We know how much emphasis Hibs are putting on characters in the dressing room. Speaking to David Gray at the end of last season, he was saying that one of the things about Joe Bursick was that he was a really popular figure in the dressing room, really kind of a good part of the squad, and that's something that you have to try and replace. You also need to bring somebody in who can, as I said, challenge Jordan Smith, who I think you could argue doesn't deserve to lose the gloves. For any reason. He's performed very well last season, and I think at the moment it's probably the ball's probably in Sallinger's court to be challenging him to prove that he deserves to start. And you need someone who has experience, and he has plenty of that from his time in Austria. I think a little bit similar to Jordan Smith in that he's maybe not played that many games for a goalkeeper of his age, but I think a similar kind of career trajectory, to Jordan Smith, in that signs for Hibs having not played that many games over a certain time span, but it's one of those situations where I think Hibs can probably give him an opportunity to try and kick on to really kind of push Jordan Smith. And I mean, I doubt he's come here to spend his time sitting on the bench. So I think it sets up a really intriguing battle for that sort of number one spot. I think we've seen with David Gray and the coaching staff, if somebody's not performing, then they will take them out of the team. So I think two sort of experienced goalkeepers who can really push each other, and sort of provide a kind of strong pair of hands at the spine of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously you only really get a true handle on a new signing when you get to see them play. But I mean, you can always take a wee bit of indication as to sort of what the reaction is like when a player leaves a club, and how the club reacts to that, how the fans react to that. I mean, and certainly if you look at how Hartberg responded to Sallinger moving on, it was nothing but goodwill there, nothing but good things said about him. Clearly a very popular figure, popular player at the club, and it's just a wee kind of snapshot of it here. I'm just bringing it up. Just bear with me, folks. I've got a full piece profiling Sallinger on our website, so you can get a read at that. But just to kind of put you in the picture for now, they said he was described as the Iceman in the club's farewell statement. The sporting director, with a pretty glowing tribute to him, says until the very end, he was an absolute cornerstone and key performer, playing a major role in our success. His skill with the ball at his feet and in building up play is unmatched in Austria. He also repeatedly saved points for us with brilliant saves and strong reflexes on the line. Naturally, his departure is a painful loss, but it once again shows that TSV Hartberg is a perfect platform to step into the spotlight and recommend oneself for greater challenges. The move abroad is the next step, and we warmly congratulate Raphael on it and wish him a call-up to the national team one day, national team being the Austrian national team potentially. So I suppose that kind of ticks a couple of boxes there in terms of what you were talking about. In terms of character, obviously very well liked. Club clearly sad to see him go. And as well as that, there's, speaking glowingly about his abilities as well there. So, I mean, it's, again, as I said, hard to get a full handle on a player until you actually, see them play for your club. But I mean, it's kind of sounds positive. Sounds kind of like it's ticking quite a few boxes. What we can do as well, folks, is just have a wee look at his stats, just a bit more in depth. And it's, again, sometimes it can be a wee bit, a jump scare there, bringing the two of us up. Just bear with me a second.
Nobody wants that.
Let me just here we go. Let me just bring that down for you, folks. Oh God, this is just not working for us today, is it?
It's Friday.
There we go. There's some added options at the end here that I hadn't seen before, so I'm going to blame them. The system seems to have changed a wee bit. But here we are, Raphael Sallinger's stats from StatsBomb. I mean, it can be a wee bit harder to judge goalkeepers, I think, but on statistics, because I think some of them, the numbers don't always tell you an awful lot in isolation. You could talk about, a save percentage or, the amount of shots saved per 90 minutes, and it sometimes doesn't provide a lot of context. What kind of shots does he save? Is there, are these big chances that he's stopping, or is he, is he collecting daisy cutters from 30 yards? So it needs a wee bit more context sometimes, I think, especially stats around goalkeepers. So, I mean, the one that kind of sticks out here, StatsBomb pulled together this thing called positive outcome. And what that basically is, it kind of gives you a greater indication of his all-round performance. Rather than just, as I said, they're kind of individual metrics. So the positive outcome sort of refers to, it says here, the actions that prevent a goal or contribute to a positive sequence for the team. That includes stuff like, obviously, shot stopping, distribution, among other things. Sallinger got a 1.9 on that last season, which put him in the top 9% of goalkeepers in the Austrian Bundesliga. So, I mean, whatever else, Hibs are signing a guy who is coming to the club in good form, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he certainly had to bide his time waiting for a chance at Hartberg, but when it's come, he has taken it. I think initially he was came in as the number one for the second half of a season, which obviously comparable to Jordan Smith, and then last season he's had a very, very kind of impressive kind of full campaign. I think it was 38 games and 12 clean sheets. So I mean that's a decent record. Worth pointing out as well that Hartberg they didn't finish particularly high in the Bundesliga. I think they were competing in the what's it called? I think they called it. I've completely forgotten the name of it. I think it could be something like the relegation group, which maybe doesn't tell the full story. But it's the Austrian top flight kind of splits into two, where you've got sort of the top half are kind of competing for European places, and the bottom half are just kind of trying to avoid relegation. So similar to the kind of top six, bottom six in Scotland, but they also have the added the added chance of getting into Europe. I think you can. I think Hartberg were actually involved in that. I think they got to the semi-finals, the sort of European playoffs, and were beaten in the last four. So, clearly he's played a big part in Hartberg having a fairly decent season. And you're right about what you say about goalkeeping stats and saying, like his shot stopping is good. I'm reminded of Roy Keane sort of saying, that's his job, because it is. But I think. To put it into context, if you look at the positive outcome as a good indication of, not just being about sort of stopping the ball from going into the net. It's about, how you're saving it, starting attacks, that sort of, all that sort of thing. And I think, generally speaking, when we talk about stats bomb radars, I think the wider they are, or the closer they are to the outside circles, the better. And I think
that is a good rule of thumb.
It is, and it also makes it sort of quite straightforward to understand. As well, if you're not familiar with stats bomb, or indeed sort of stats like XG and X, XA, whatever you want to call it. Let's not dwell on that because we'll start losing viewers. But yeah, it does sort of suggest a goalkeeper who has performed strongly in a lot of key areas, and I think the kind of main message from Sallinger himself and from his team back in Austria was basically, this is a chance for him to kind of go on to the next level. And interesting, I thought we were saying about him pushing for the national team, whether or not they've had some indication from the Austrian side, the coaching staff, that he is sort of there or thereabouts, but maybe needs to be playing at a higher level. That could be part of it. So that's quite good, because that's, if he's got that sort of personal ambition, and he's also, as we saw from his Hibs TV interview yesterday, he's very keen to help Hibs have an even better season than the one that has just passed, which is, it's ambitious, it's positive, it's optimistic. So I think he's clearly kind of sort of fully subscribed to the kind of team's aims, and he's got his own personal ambitions. And I think probably a little bit of making up for lost time when you look at his career, that he's not played a lot of football. He spoke about leaving Austria previously. He had a spell in Germany, which I think was pretty forgettable in his own words, and going by sort of stats and game time. So I think he probably looks at this as a kind of second chance. I think a lot of players who come to him, sort of, they come into the Scottish capital, they come into a big stadium. I think Hartberg Stadium is a fraction of the size of Easter Road, and maybe a little bit different from what he's used to in the Austrian Bundesliga, where you've got sort of like 3 or 4 teams who can arguably kind of challenge for the top spot or the top 2 spots. He's watched enough of Hibs games recently to know the lie of the land here. But I mean, talking about saying last season, if Hibs had a better start, then they could maybe put a bit more pressure on Rangers. He's clued in, and that sort of ambition. That's what I think we know that the coaching staff want to bring in. They want to bring in players who are going to keep that kind of level of. It's not really optimism. I suppose it's confidence, isn't it? It's that sort of not just turning up and being happy to be involved, but saying, no, let's try and take this team to the next level. Let's, we've had a good season. Let's build on it, because we know in recent seasons that the team that finishes third the following season tends to struggle a wee bit, and I think Hibs will be very aware of that. I'll be keen to buck the trend, and try and ensure that they're fighting on as many fronts as possible for as long as possible. And I think Sallinger looks like he'd be a good addition to that. And as you say, it's a lot depends on how he actually looks, like the eye test. But I'm sure we'll get a chance to see him in action soon enough, and probably draw a few more conclusions then.
Yeah, the fact that he's in early means we'll be able to get like a good look at him over pre-season. I'd imagine he'll be involved in most, if not all, of that. There's just one wee bit of kind of to bore you with some more stats before we move on. But this is always a good indicator for goalkeepers. So this is this here again from StatsBomb. It just plots sort of actual goals conceded on your sort of horizontal axis at the bottom, and then goals saved above average on the vertical side there. And basically and this is a good metric for measuring goalkeepers really. Basically what that tells you, goals saved above average, is like how many goals does a keeper prevent above what would be expected based on the difficulty of the shots that they're facing. And so, I mean, as you can see there, Hartberg and Sallinger don't rank particularly high up in terms of actual goals conceded, but you can see he's right up there and does well in terms of goals prevented above what the expected goals model, if you like, would expect him to probably concede. So it sort of suggests that he's a goalkeeper that does have some big saves in him. That would certainly, chime with what Hartberg's sporting director had to say about him as well. He's not just kind of throwing that statement out there to big up an outgoing player. There is some substance with that in the data as well. So, I mean, as I said, we'll get a proper look and once pre-season gets up and running. But it's good that Hibs have got a goalkeeper in the early doors, especially with these European qualifiers coming up. Create some competition for Jordan Smith. It'll be interesting to see the two of them competing for that number 1 jersey, and we'll see who's holding that by the time those European games come around, and indeed the start of the Scottish Premiership season as well. Just to take it back to the two of us, folks, I'm sure you're all delighted with that. So just to address, we've got a question here from Far Beyond the Stars. Where does this leave New Zealander Alex Pollson, who was also linked with a move to Hibs? In fact, he was name-checked pretty much by Tim Bezbachenko, the Black Knight FC president, as someone who could potentially go on loan to Easter Road this season. I think there were some reports from maybe, was he Australian media down, or certainly in the A-League sphere, about him potentially heading to Hibs as well. But with Sallinger coming in, Patrick, where does that leave? Where does that leave any potential interest in Pollson, at least for the time being?
Yeah, I think it probably. I think it'd be very surprising to see Pollson turn up on loan. I think when you look at what Hibs needs for this season, they obviously need somebody who can provide competition for Jordan Smith. But when it comes to the European squad, you need a certain number of goalkeepers, and you also need a certain number of like homegrown, I think they call them club trained or association trained players. Essentially, it's homegrown players. And so I imagine that, we could do a whole separate video on Murray Johnson, but I think given his sort of status as a homegrown player and as a goalkeeper, he would be sort of like an obvious third choice for the European games, to kind of fill that homegrown quota and take that third goalkeeper spot. But I think once the regular season starts, you'd be looking at getting him out on a season-long loan at a team probably fairly high up, but lower down in the SPFL, if that makes sense. And it's whether or not, if you've got loan arrangements in place, if you've got recall options, then you don't really need to have 3 goalkeepers at the club. If you're not, competing in Europe, obviously, with Hibs competing in Europe, they do need that. But at some point, we don't know when. We hope it's not particularly soon. But if Hibs are no longer competing in Europe, then there's obviously the option for Murray Johnson to go out on loan. But I think between Sallinger and Pollson, I kind of said this at the top of the show that Sallinger has that experience. He has a number of years playing in European football, as in playing football in Europe. I think he has got a little bit of experience of European fixtures, but not necessarily playing. I think just being involved in the squad earlier on in his career. But I think when Bezbachenko was pointing out and saying that Pollson could be a good fit, I don't obviously we look at that and we think it's dropping a heavy hint, but I think it was maybe just a good example, and it certainly would have been something that I think the club would have looked at. I think you can't really ignore the 2 good seasons that Pollson's had in Australia, playing for Wellington Phoenix and then Auckland FC. Kind of had a good first season, and then a good kind of second season backed it up. But I think a little bit of uncertainty over how he would adapt to sort of European football. The fact that Bournemouth want to have a look at him in pre-season as well, would probably kind of limit when he could, when if it was going to be Pollson, it would probably limit when he was going to be able to come up. And I think that combined with David Gray saying how keen he is to get transfer business done as soon as possible, even though it's not always possible to do that. I think that sort of we can probably assume a fair bit from that Sallinger was possibly a better fit. Just in terms of the sort of overall profile of what Hibs are looking for. It's the same with every position. There'll be sort of several players on a long list that'll then get whittled down to a short list, and then it's about which one's the best fit, who could we get, who sort of like ticks as many boxes as possible in terms of character in the dressing room, experience, what they can bring to the team, that sort of thing. So yeah, like I say, be very surprised to see Pollson turning up anytime soon at Hibs. I think obviously we've heard a lot about the Black Knights and how there can be these sort of intergroup moves, if you like. And I suspect we probably will see more examples of that as as the group kind of grows. They're sort of adding teams all the time, and I think we will probably see a bit more of that further down the line. But it's possible that when Bezbachenko said Hibs could be a logical next step, it was literally just an example, rather than sort of trying to tip us a wink or anything like that. So I think Pollson undoubtedly the very good goalkeeper based on his last 2 seasons and the fact that Bournemouth are keen to have a look at him. But obviously not one for this season for Hibs. And I think they've looked at Sallinger and I think decided he's probably the best person who's able to really kind of push Jordan Smith to potentially take over the gloves if it comes to that, and in terms of what he brings to the dressing room and what he can add to the group. So an interesting one for future perhaps. I don't think you'd entirely close the door on it at this point, but I think you mentioned it yourself. It's about getting keepers in as early as possible and trying to get as much preparation under the belts before the European games come around.
Yeah, exactly. I think Hibs are really not in a position to, in some areas at least, not to not hang about. I mean, there could be, guys who are, always in a transfer window. There's always guys who are worth waiting on. If it sometimes goes to the very end, but I think when you literally don't have enough people in the building in certain positions, then you can't really afford to hang about until Bournemouth potentially get a look at Pollson. If that was a consideration, I imagine it probably was. But I mean, they've obviously been very convinced on Sallinger. The move to get him in as early as possible. As I said, there's a kind of fuller profile of the Hibs new signing on hibsobserver.co.uk, and you can sign up to read that for just £1 and get full access to all our content for the next 6 months if you want to read a bit more about him and indeed keep up with all our pre-season content. As I said, as we move towards these European games into the transfer window, there's going to be so much happening over the next few months. But for now, we're going to park it there. Hopefully that was a decent insight into Hibs' new signing. And as I said, more to read on the website if you do fancy it. But for now, folks, we're going to say goodbye, but we'll speak to you again very soon, probably back at the start of next week, hopefully with plenty to talk about. So have a good weekend and take care.